And John's been through them all.
Jesus. What is the Ice Age like?
You know, it was just as bad as you'd think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
5,000
This-
feet of ice.
this
Right here
is
where
the
we're
Ice
sitting,
Age.
it's 5,000 feet of ice.
But it was a lot easier than going through another revision of the master plan.
You know, I'd go for the Ice Age anytime. Absolutely. Well, it's 7 o'clock. The film is running.
Thank you.
So, is everybody ready to get started? I love the enthusiasm. It's, okay, we have minutes. Have people gone over the minutes? What do they think?
I had a question.
Okay.
Skimmed them, I thought they were accurate.
My question is, item 2, first page.
Yeah.
The select board felt it needs $400,000 a year to balance the budget going forward. Now, we talked about two different things. We talked about $400,000
Copy too.
actual increase in revenue, or is it $400,000 in the tax bill?
I thought it was in the tax.
I heard it was
Yeah.
tax, I heard tax base as well.
Right, because this said it needs
No, because that's
400,000.
peanuts.
Oh, is that right?
400,000 tax base,
One new house.
that generates like $10,000 revenue for the town each year, that's nothing.
Oh, so the.
That is of revenue.
That's
Well, that's Jay, right?
Well,
How can you do
but
that
when
in a
Sue
year, though?
presented it, I thought she said it was $400,000 increase in tax base.
I
year.
also
Yeah.
remember revenue.
Revenue, okay.
Revenue.
Yeah.
All right, so is that accurate, what it says? Felt it needs 400,000 a year to balance the budget?
I couldn't tell you, we never discussed it at a meeting I was at, but I missed 2 months, 3 months worth of meetings.
Well, I
Okay,
think Sue was the one that said.
well,
If you look at,
We have a video.
That's, that's
right,
whether or not it was
What-
discussed in the
the
select board meeting.
increase in
that's
the
what she said
actual
last time.
operating budget, if you look at our operating budget over the last 10 years, adjusted for inflation, it's gone down 4%. The operating budget isn't the problem, it's the special warrant articles,
right.
the stuff the critical roads repairs that need to be made and so forth, that are really generating. Our operating budget this year is, I think we figured it out, it's, percentage-wise, it was 2%, it's around $49,000.
No, there it is.
I'm just gonna let it go
It
to.
could be the other one.
And there's,
Does it say?
It's the public.
the public is called. All right, so the question for the minutes is this accurate? My understanding is that they were looking for $400,000 a year, not like
Of actual revenue.
of actual revenue.
So how much would that be in increase in tax?
Well, there was somebody here, last time who at the end said, they did, I don't know if this is accurate, but it was a quick calculation, and they said it was like $16 million.
Yeah, okay, I do remember that, and I think it was like 14.8 million or
14.8 million.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
so that's a lot,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
off the charts.
it's off the chart.
Okay.
But that's, I think that's what this means. Maybe we should,
So
maybe we
what's
should
the-
change it to say that the Selectwoman McKenzie felt,
$400,000 in actual
is
revenue.
Jay telling us this is not an opinion of the select board?
Okay, so I'll just say Sue, because she's referred to as Sue.
Yeah. Whatever it is, a year in
And this was,
in additional revenue, maybe we
Yeah.
should say, a year to balance the budget. Doesn't get a little clear.
All right, well, what do you want to say here?
I think it's,
I think it's just revenue, because, it doesn't have to come from taxes. I mean, we could get gifts from the federal government.
No, but
They,
the discussion here was that it should come from development.
that was what they were recommending.
Right.
But.
well,
the
they're
point is that-
presenting.
But
They
these
present-
minutes are to represent what was said here, not.
They presented it as a $400,000 gap in the budget, and that was the problem, and they were presenting the solution as development.
Yeah, so that's what, I mean, that's what it says here, is it felt it needs 400,000 a year to balance the budget.
That's right, and then they went on to say that one, assisted living facility would be adequate, or
But
something.
that I don't,
But, well,
was
we
that at that
started,
meeting or no, different?
no, that was at the end of that meeting.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah,
So, all right, so what's,
So, yeah.
what's the wording here?
Well, I wanna change, Sue McKenzie felt it needs $400,000 a year in actual revenues to balance the budget.
You know, the town needs $400,000 a year in additional revenue to balance the budget.
Okay, so, say that again, so that David can get that?
Sue McKenzie felt that the town needs $400,000 a year in additional revenue to balance the budget.
Got that?
Yeah, that's-
Or can we authorize David to look at the tape and figure out who actually said it?
Yeah,
Well, Sue was one, that's, I have no problems with that at all.
okay,
Okay.
okay.
I can look at the tape too, but that's,
Well, Mills isn't really good at attribution, actually. The people he talked about, all the experts that he visited with, they were not in the right places all the time. So, I mean, he could be generalizing here and not really actually being specific.
Okay, no, that's,
About the 400,000?
No, about who said it.
Oh,
okay.
right, well, I remember hearing that a bunch of times.
Yeah, no, Sue did say that at
Yeah.
some point, I don't know whether it was like right at the beginning. So, you know, what do you want to say?
I,
I felt as though my clarification is what I thought.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah, I
think
think
it's
that's-
All right,
somebody
I
else's
think that's
responsibility.
right. All right, anything else?
Well, then, that amount reflects a 4.4% annual increase. So that, what she means is that it's increasing at 4.4% every year. Is that what you're
The 4.4
But then Mike Smith,
percent was the tax rate increase, wasn't it? Our taxes are, Jay, you would know better, our taxes are increasing at 4.4% a year, it was my
then
impression.
later on, Mike Smith said somewhere that it was actually 4.1.
No, he didn't say it was 4.1, he said that over the past 10 years, he was making the point that the 4.4% isn't that outrageous, because for the past 10 years, it was a 4.1% average.
Right, so it hasn't gone up that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of opinion, but it's not that out of line with the annual increases, going back 10 years, using his figures.
Right.
Okay, so is there any, you wanna change anything about the 4.4% annual increase?
Just so everybody understands that that includes the school and the town budget.
Yeah, there's the
Not just,
overall,
yeah,
overall,
overall spending.
reflects 4.4% overall, or annual overall, and, no, I don't know.
I mean, if that's what they said, I'm not agreeing with that number as being precise. But
Okay, the Mike Smith-
It may be a
The 4.4%, I
I
think,
don't know what.
I think it was in the video.
That's what they said, then that's what
The
the
Mike
minutes.
Smith quote is on page 3 at the top, and, so we should, I mean, I'm thinking that there's internal consistency about what people were saying, so we could identify 4.4% as a, rise, and you did, you wanted,
That was just for last year.
no, 4.4 annual increase
Well, they were projecting that forward.
in town and school expenditures, didn't it say? Because
Well,
it doesn't say.
400,000 is 4% of 10 million, which is roughly the total
Right.
town budget, right?
So that's in the ballpark.
Yeah. So that's in the ballpark.
Okay, anything else?
Good.
All right, anybody, all right, oh, the question.
I have a couple things. I'd be delighted to provide the URL to the to the YouTube video
Okay.
to David, actually, you must
I
have it.
do have,
I
you have
think
it.
he sent it on
I
to
did
us.
send it,
Yeah,
Deborah.
we-
So it might be good to put it here, just so that people coming along can see it. I have no intention of throwing this stuff away. YouTube have plenty of storage. So there's that. I forgot to sign the autograph sheet for the meeting last time, so I
I
was.
think you're in there.
Actually, I don't see my name as members of the public, but, and I think it's Kathy Hopper, Hopper.
Yeah, sometimes it is
Right, yeah, hard to.
very hard to,
Oh, absolutely.
read
yeah.
people's,
I mean, you do yeoman service.
Oh, right, so you're not on here.
I'm not there.
so we will add
So
you.
and I neglected to sign it.
Well, that.
Does
that'll
that
do it, but-
invalidate the meeting or anything?
But usually we'll
Yes.
remember you anyway.
Right, so just in the purpose of,
Sure.
in the purposes of historical accuracy.
And I do have you down for, on tonight's already.
Thank
Don't need
you.
to sign. And you, David.
David, too.
All right, so, would any, all right, I'll make a motion, to adopt, the minutes, with the, changes by Tim and the board. Second by Vicky, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right. It passes with great enthusiasm. All right, so we have planning goals, and then, we have, I guess we all got, also the letters that everybody wrote, and we should go over them. I thought they were very good. Yours was like a haiku. Yeah, I like that, I know, I mean, it really did. So, shall we do our planning goals first, and then, okay. So, I'll go first. My thoughts are to, we wanna go ahead, well, I think we should go ahead with, our housing chapter. And, we should really get on that build-out analysis. There are funds available, and I think what we need to decide, do we wanna keep it at the scope we defined it as, or do we wanna expand it at all?
You're referring to the senior housing amendment? or the
Yeah,
housing
that,
chapter?
where they were gonna do, the common area, and,
That's this, that's the further.
yeah, right, and Amber got that, good job.
So, yeah, no, you're done, right?
Done?
I'm retired.
Oh, really?
I've been retired for a week and so busy, it's been ridiculous.
Because of your new,
Yeah, my new ventures,
Yeah.
which are not moving very fast.
I haven't seen this Valley News.
And that's not yet.
But that's why you're working so hard?
Yeah, but anyways, but I did write that proposal.
So would somebody else be there who could do the work?
Yep, so Megan Butts would be
Mhm.
the one who would be doing the work.
And if we were to expand it to the whole town, would that still fit into like being able to get done?
I don't know, like what time frame do you mean?
Like ASAP, obviously.
Yeah, yeah,
I would first question how much the
Yeah.
increase.
Yeah, it's gonna
Yeah.
cost a lot.
Because,
and you'd have to define parameters, a little bit
Yeah,
more
we have to,
too,
yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, I think we could, I mean, the whole town isn't realistic, I mean,
Yeah, it's not
we
realistic.
could lop off the vast majority quite quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not
Yeah,
gonna,
like the
we're not
whole-
talking about outdoor Dorchester Road, all that, I mean, that's,
That whole zone.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Could be Route 10.
basically, ten corridors, fine.
So,
Got on that one.
then the question would be, well, then we would have to send it back for another
Yeah.
appraisal.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is incredibly helpful because at least it tells us, gives us a target population for the area that we really want, and, you know, we could ask for a supplement.
Well, that's what I'm wondering,
There's like
is,
a cost to
since we have this and we know we can afford it, or
Mhm.
we think we can afford it,
Mhm.
we could go ahead with this and then if we get it back and feel like, well, the results are such that weren't really, wasn't great news, so we can just expand it.
Is this the kind of thing that they might get into it and halfway through call us and say, you've got no capacity, let's,
No.
so they're gonna do it from start to
Yeah,
finish?
it's just an analysis, yeah, yeah.
Because sometimes
We're not
you
trying
can
to
see the
buy
writing on the wall
Yeah,
and you
right.
wanna change your strategy midstream.
I think the thing, you know, so much in the existing master plan and just basic planning principles, having the town, this common area as a compact and seeing what's possible there is, that's been the approach for so long, and it makes sense, but we've
That's-
never really found out what can we do, so with that as a starting point, it seems like a pretty good idea. So we'll either find out, well, nothing can be done, something can be done, or tons can be done.
Yeah.
And
so-
this is
So
still
the
the guidance
subject-
we have from the town, is that we want development to be
Right,
in
And
the center of
if I
town, so
remember-
that's where we should start.
right.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly, the parameters were the, existing conditions,
Right.
comparing that to, the senior housing chapter? Is that right?
The senior housing article,
Article, yeah,
Proposal.
proposal,
Yeah.
so not necessarily other things, like general commercial development, right?
We wanted
But no,
the
it's-
impact of
So-
what we're proposing.
Right,
Yeah.
But
exactly,
the septic
so,
is, the septic seems to have been an issue. I mean, when John and Eric and I were trying to work on it last year, I don't know how you guys are gonna do the septic without doing a huge amount of work.
it's generalized, so,
But if it's too generalized, it's not gonna be accurate enough, is it?
well, I mean.
Because that's a real limiting factor.
Right, so you take the, what you know, like the science that you know, like so soils. So the data that
Yeah.
exists, we wouldn't create new data
Right.
because that would be so exorbitantly expensive if we were to take every parcel and look at every survey and, I
Yeah,
mean,
that
you
was my
wouldn't.
question.
But yeah, so this is
We tried
like,
to do that, but
Yeah,
for some
we
reason,
we
the
did,
records,
we didn't try to, we did it.
we did it, but the
Yeah.
records are missing.
Yeah, a lot of
for
missing
so
records.
much, so
well,
it's-
you could provide Megan with what you know.
Well,
And that would be
you have
helpful.
that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still have the spreadsheets on my desk.
Yeah.
And so she could just incorporate that, especially if it's.
Well, it'll be helpful, I mean, what we
Yeah.
had
Can't
will be
hurt.
helpful.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
some were accurate, a few of the
Yeah.
properties were accurate.
Yeah.
I'm still
so-
looking at trying to, look at DES rules and make some general, apply some general rules and see what is, basically, they have a minimum lot size and they can base a septic on. And so basing that minimum lot size and what types of soils are available, and I'm not entirely sure it can be done because the soil data that they want to make their decisions seems to be something that you need to have a soil scientist dig. It's not something that I can
Right.
get from.
And these are DES requirements?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like my house, I've got half acre, and I limited my development to 2 bedrooms,
The DES?
GS.
Yeah,
and
so
I
this
can't-
is
I
not,
can't have
this is
more.
not town,
No,
so, I mean,
no.
that's out of our
No, I
hands.
mean, and it's like, that's pretty limiting,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's
considering,
very similar to, most of the properties on the common with smaller lots,
Mhm.
basically sub 5 acre.
Mhm.
They do not like to increase the septic size.
Mhm.
And so they won't approve a larger septic. They'll let you have what you have, but they won't go any larger.
Do they require a backup area too?
No, they,
No. So if it fails, then they just assume you're gonna
Replace
tear the
in
whole thing
place.
up and
Yeah,
replace
Yep.
it.
it's only- it's new construction,
When it fails.
Well, it seemed, I mean, we did what we could do. I mean, we did pretty in-depth research.
yeah.
And it's over our, beyond our capacity to go any further.
Mhm.
So we need professionals
Mhm.
to do it.
Mhm.
So I would say that we ask them to go ahead, and we can look at this as, if the report is, you can do anything in downtown Lyme, well, then we'll know that. I doubt that's what's gonna happen. But if we find that it's extremely limited, then we can go back to them and say, okay, we want a second round of stuff. But since we have this in hand, I think we should get started, because I think getting the housing chapter done is, as soon as we can is important. And it's basically gonna be it's really gonna be an informational chapter, because we're just providing information that we've discovered. After that, if we do a survey or visioning, we'd add to it. So this would be kind of a provisional chapter.
Well,
So I-
stuff like this, I mean, we
Well,
can talk about statewide trends and,
Or-
when they do.
We're talking about, the zoning amendment article,
Right.
Right.
as well as a chapter of the housing, of the
Yeah.
master plan. So those are two,
We-
I
Very
don't
different.
necessarily think they're different, because a lot of things that come out of the build-out,
can be, stuff, some of the information can be recycled for sure.
I think it should be made available in the chapter.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, it should be, because that would be the basis for you writing the senior housing article.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we already have actually a lot of basis for it, but this would be more.
Should we get input from, more systematic input from townspeople before writing the chapter?
Sure,
We're talking
that's
about moving
fine.
to a rolling update of the master plan. A lot of the stuff we talked about last week dealt with visioning for updates to the master plan.
Well, our housing forums were supposed to be informing us, so, I mean,
Right.
that, those are what those were for.
I think what we can do with working on the housing chapter, and, I think you're right, Vicki, that we hope that would generate more interest, but I think we can continue by having meetings that are dedicated to our progress on the housing chapter, and essentially dedicating at least a part of the meeting, asking the public to come in, telling them where we are and asking for their input.
Well, honestly, no one's gonna come until we have something written that they can start shooting at.
Right.
Right.
So that,
I mean,
as
they're
we,
not gonna help us.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, that's just how it
You've
is.
done it before, I
No
haven't,
one-
so.
What?
So you've been through this before, I haven't.
Well, would you go? Just to talk in general about housing? I mean, most people,
Oh, but for example, none of those, the senior housing stuff I wouldn't have come to that.
right,
The millennial stuff, I wouldn't have come to that, none of those apply to me,
Mhm.
so, there are groups we missed.
well, we were gonna do that, the family one.
and we still have the offer for
And we
that.
still have the offer, so we can still
For
do
Andrew,
that.
because he didn't,
Yeah,
make it.
because he didn't come to the senior one.
Right, so he did reach out. and
Would you have
say-
come to the family one?
Right.
With a family, it
Yeah.
makes it tough.
Yeah, right, yeah, the families can't come because they've got family, it's a catch-22, yeah.
We've got like demographic, perspective here around the table. We've got people with kids, and we've got retired people, and then, mid-range people, so.
Where are the,
Definitely-
where are
I'm
the,
in the
where are the mid-range?
I like that.
Yeah.
Mid-range.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've been listening to people and their concerns for a while.
But I think we can encourage participation along the way by dedicating certain parts of the meeting to basically updates on the housing chapter. And if people choose not to come, we can't go out and drag them.
It's like, I think that, what I've heard is that they want not to be restricted in terms of forms of housing that they can have.
Who's they?
People out in the town of Lyme, they don't want to be restricted, they want flexibility. And they want be able to do smaller, we got the ADU. They want more housing, but it's like, we gotta make clear that the town isn't the producer of the housing. We facilitate by having regulations that allow housing to be built. And, you know, so it's not like the town's fault that there isn't, it's people who won't sell their property, who aren't creating, you know, accessory dwelling units. I mean, you know,
Well,
that's what's.
I think there's a wide range of opinions about, you know, what the problems are.
Well, we could talk about, you know, the water and sewer, the lack of internet, we've already said that. I mean, I think we've got enough information to at least put out some, you know, a housing chapter and to give people an opportunity to comment on.
Well, I think we definitely have plenty of information. I think we can get more. I mean, just from the workforce housing stuff and the overall, we did an overall housing inventory too. That's important stuff. We're gonna have to update that, I think.
What, 2 years since we
Workforce?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but that's, you know, an update is, you already have the base data, so
Right,
you
it's
just
not
look
gonna
at
be,
what's
it's
changed.
not gonna be reinventing the wheel. Just that is a lot of information for people.
It's really a lot.
And we have more than that, and we'll have more than that when we get this, this build out.
That's better information than you can get from the state or from the census. So, I mean, it's real data.
And,
which is
you know,
really, to your credit.
and
for
to,
putting it
well,
together.
thank you. Oh, thank you.
Well, all of you will,
But
I'm just.
all of us, yeah. There are surveys of, you know, Community Cares of Lyme did 2 surveys, and we don't have them, so I think we should look at those. How does everybody else?
Just take what we can about housing.
David, could you ask Patty
Yep.
to provide the 2 results from the 2 surveys?
And I feel like somebody's already offered to provide us with at least the most recent one.
I think Martha
Yeah,
Tuckett, yeah, so
yeah.
let's take them up on that, I think that would be valuable to have. So, maybe it would be helpful, in order to put pressure on ourselves to, come up with, you know, due dates. Jay is looking particularly happy because, but
I tried to get it all done before town meeting.
this year,
Yeah, well, that's when Jay goes off the,
But don't-
He's gonna become an alternate. if
All of
he
Jay's
is,
unfinished tasks go to the next person who
Yeah,
takes his
yeah.
spot, right? So,
No.
Rusty.
No, I think maybe our new selectman might take.
well, it's up to them. It's-
But no, Jay wants to be an alternate after.
Is that right, Jay? We're gonna miss you, we're gonna miss your briefcase.
Yes.
Actually, I'll speak for myself, I really miss you, and it's been, really, really great, being on the board with you. You're a great guy, and I'm sorry you're retiring from our presence, but, thank you very much, really.
Thank you.
I'll start to cry if I go anymore, so I'll stop.
So just for the build-out analysis, I believe I have to wait until town meeting, make sure my budget passes, and then I can, or should I just assume it's going to, and
Well, we usually don't spend anything that we don't normally spend until after town meeting.
It might be good to communicate with the regional planning commission to say, you know, if we get a okay at town meeting, we'll be ready to go after that date, so that they don't promise all of Megan's time away.
Okay, so who does that?
Definitely would be good. I'd be happy to, oh,
Or
no,
you-
go for it, you should
if
do
you just
it.
tell me who to,
I would call Megan,
okay.
yeah,
What's her last name?
Butts, B-U-T-T-S.
and we're pretty confident one to be there, right?
As long as my budget passes, then, yeah, if it gets slashed, then no, but, you know, I'll be able to find money within my budget
Okay.
to do it.
Do we have other, like, study needs, like, did you budget for 2 studies, or is it just 1 study?
I did not budget for any studies.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to move money around and reallocate it
Mm-hmm.
to make room for it.
Okay.
And I think if, you know, if there's a problem, we'll go to the select board and
Mhm.
ask for money.
Okay.
All right, so do we wanna, have a due date of, you know,
Well, ASAP.
yeah,
I
that's-
mean, that's the thing. Oh, you mean for the chapter or
For the chapter.
Oh, I thought you were talking about.
No,
the
obviously for that it's
Well,
ASAP.
how can we say, I mean, I think what we need is a good outline and see what we wanna put in it. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you know, we
Alright.
want, I mean, if we have to do these updates,
Right.
you know, realistically, how soon can the inventory and the workforce housing update be done? And then, you know,
Okay,
so I think having a good outline and then being able to say, I think people can write different sections.
all right,
I mean,
so,
it could be, you know, that we could use the workforce housing, you know, study as an appendix and, you know, put 2 paragraphs in about what we found out there.
right.
So it doesn't have to be long.
Yeah, I think that, so when it's an appendix, I forgot, I think it should be easily accessible at part of the,
Just have it online. I mean, just say.
but what about with the, hard copy?
I'm not worried about that. We can make copies and have the master here and have a copy at the
Yeah.
library and have it online,
Okay,
so. People can download it.
all right, so the first step will be, coming up with an outline. I'll try and do that.
Great.
And everybody else is welcome to.
That's okay. Yeah, well, I'm sure we can all add stuff. I'll send a couple of ideas that I have to you so you can put
Okay.
it together.
All right. And then there's the, our zoning amendment list. David, you said you had some stuff.
Had stuff, but you've covered it all.
Oh, we've covered it all?
Yeah,
So we don't have any outstanding,
not at the moment,
oh, I thought we had some,
Wait, something was left over, wasn't it?
let me double check that, but,
Last year.
I thought we had a few things we said. Well, one, you know, there were a few things that came up at the meeting last time and at previous meetings. One thing that we said we would do is, you know, go back and take a look at local ag soils. So let's do that. Let's take a look at that.
So is that, which ones to regulate?
I don't think we even need to prejudge what I think we should go and see whether the existing approach is reasonable.
Well, it's hard for me to gauge. I mean, I feel like we need to talk to like a soil scientist to say, you know, or somebody who works for extension to go like, well, no, not really, you
All
know.
right, so what would you suggest?
I would suggest inviting them to come and comment on that
Okay.
for us, because.
So let's do that.
You know, go, oh yeah, I like the name of that one, let's keep it in, and, you
So,
know,
let's do that.
yeah.
How do we do that?
And I would also like to see a visual, like I think it would be nice to see a map of the soils.
can't do it.
We could do that, definitely.
Any
Just,
summary statistics about percentages
Mm.
or
Yeah, we can,
what percentage of the land is, in which category is belongs
so
to
that's,
certain types of?
I mean, really, all we need to see, right, is undeveloped soils, more or less.
Well,
And
no,
it-
we still are regulating them, so if a poor person, I mean, well, I guess ours excludes some that have houses, but, you know, say they wanna put their garage or their tennis court or something, and it's a local ag soil, I mean, we do wanna know where they are, what the
Yeah.
extent is.
Yeah.
But I would, you know, really wanna hear about the resource value, not how it impedes or doesn't impede
Right,
development.
right, no, that's,
You know,
that's
it's
backwards.
important for us to be protecting, cause that's really the
I
question.
think, you know, till now, what the but the reasoning has been is we're following Grafton County's ratings basically. And that if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. But it doesn't hurt to, you know, do more due diligence and just see where we come out.
And you need to not only just look at the, you know, when you look at, it's not just local ag soils and national ag soils. Within the local encompasses several different types. And you may wanna look at those types and say, okay, this type we definitely wanna keep. If you look at Scott Bailey's field off of Shoestrap, that is a local ag soil. That's probably a type you wanna keep. But if you look at some other ones that are hydric or, you know, don't have the value, you know, those, you wanna look at the classifications within the,
Yeah.
So all locally important ag soils are typically defined simply from historic farm use, and that is it. So they have gone, the USDA went and basically classified those soils based on generalizations throughout the county that are locally farmed soils. So when the national soils classifications came out, those were different. And often, like, any soils that had rocks in them, for example, were eliminated from the prime ag soils. So local ag soils can include soils with lots of stones, for example, but might not have any national significance,
Right.
but locally are
But
common
isn't
soil,
it the
farmed.
type of soil, not how it's being used, but it's the actual type of soil?
So they no, the use for locally important ag soils is the use.
No, really?
well, you.
No, so they take the classification, so every soil type, right, is grouped.
Right, what if it's grown up to forest? It's still like
It's
soil.
still, it still is, right,
Right.
yeah, so, but that's the underlying soil type. So they group soil types and
Right, sandy loam,
consider
etc.
them locally important ag soils. It's not like, it's based on historic use, but it doesn't mean that the current use is the same as what it once was.
Right, so it could be forest.
It could be, a
It
lot
was-
of locally important ag soil is forest,
Yeah, well, if
actually.
you look at, you know, go back, you know, 100 years, or 150 years when Lyme was a sheep farming community, your soils that were on a slope and very stony could still support sheep. You know, you clear it off, let the grasses grow, and the sheep can browse. You wouldn't wanna till it, you can't till it, but it's still considered a local ag soil, and that may
Right,
be
it's
the
not
type of.
necessarily a contradiction that a type of locally important agricultural soil has rocks in it. That's not the be end,
Right,
end of
it
all.
still can have agricultural use,
Use.
even though
Yeah.
you can't
Right.
easily till it.
Right, and
Um,
exactly the point of locally important, because sheep farming might not have been important in other places in the country,
Right,
Right.
yeah,
or growing soybeans or growing
or
whatever.
whatever, corn, whatever.
Okay, so we wanna take a look at that.
Who did we get?
Well, it's-
Who's the guy who retired? He
Ray
retired.
Lobdell, he wrote the Grafton County Soil Survey.
could we get him?
I can call him and
Okay.
see, I know he's like kinda retired, but, and we also kinda want somebody who's out in the field doing farm management plans that are soil-based. Because they work with farmers to say, well, this would be the best thing to use for this and that, and so the Grafton County people would, do those farm plans. We wanna bring them.
I mean, it's important to remember the, forest, stuff is also,
Right, well,
it's not just.
Yeah, but our lens is right now for ag soils, and they may have other important uses for growing trees, so
Right.
that would be stated in the soil
Okay.
survey,
So, would
I
you be
can call
willing to
Ray,
take a
yeah,
look?
that's no
Okay.
problem, and then if we, and I would like to, actually, it'd be nice, you would probably feel better if somebody, from extension would come too, so we could have
Yeah,
just didn't
yeah,
even
get
talk
two,
about it,
get
yeah.
two people.
I mean, we have the USDA office right down in Orford, that there's some great people there
Yep.
that
Yep.
actually do farm,
Yeah.
farm management plans.
Okay. So, we have a subdivision and site plan review stuff that has sort of been sitting on the back burner for a while, that we wanted to actually adopt.
Well, you have the change in, or did you change or wanna change the, what's I'm losing the term.
It happens to me all the time.
There's a process thing about just doing design review, there was
Yep.
also, like a, lighting amendment that we had,
Well,
and.
Yeah, so we,
Definition of dwelling unit.
Oh,
to
no.
make it, yeah, to make, yeah, that needs to be, well, I
Oh,
mean,
you're
It's
thinking about it?
different.
yeah.
Dwelling unit?
Yeah, so let's get the dwelling unit definitions consistent on all of the regulations. Let's decide about, Vicky, gave us all that information about, different design, approaches, and you had the lighting thing as well. We should decide what we wanna do about those things. And then, the next thing that I think we need to talk about is, at some point, probably at the end of the housing chapter, we're gonna wanna consider visioning. And this leads into the meeting last week. And the takeaway that, well, what I came away from that meeting with in terms of the visioning is, I just don't think that the Lyme Community Development Committee should be having such a prominent role in the visioning. I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but I went back and I read the entire 674, 1 through 4, and it's pretty clear that it's the responsibility, it states it pretty simply, of the planning board to oversee the master plan and visioning process. And I feel like somehow this thing it's like the tail wagging the dog. We oversee that process. And I think because they assigned themselves that task and they raised $15,000 before we even knew that they existed, that they're taking a stance that's frankly inappropriate. So I think what should be happening and what happened last time is that a subcommittee can be appointed so that we get good feedback on good visioning and a good survey. But I don't think we should be really in a negotiation with the Lyme Community Development Committee about, well, we can have 2 people and they can have 2 people. I just don't think that's an appropriate interaction at all. And I think we should make that clear. That's my opinion.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Agreed.
I think in the letters we all sent around.
It was
we
pretty much a consensus.
unanimously
Yeah.
agreed that was.
Yeah.
I
It is.
also, I think there is a little concern too, because, so a master plan subcommittee would have control of the visioning process?
No, no, I mean, ultimately, the planning board oversees it.
Exactly, but if you appoint a subcommittee for the master plan visioning process,
Yeah.
then they actually do become, like, they become
Well,
overseeing it,
that's up to the board.
But, well, all I'm saying is if we do have them part of a master plan subcommittee, we should make sure that we are chairing that committee, is all I was gonna say.
The planning board has to oversee, all the aspects of it. It also has to, get the town involved and get people who are really, at high skill levels, particularly involved. How this board defines the parameters of a subcommittee is something that'll have to be discussed at the time.
Yeah, I just, I remember hearing Nils talk about how he wanted to form a subcommittee. And that's what I was like, oh my gosh, like, no,
Well-
we formed the
Well,
subcommittee.
exactly,
You don't form
and
the
that's
subcommittee.
what I'm getting at. I think everything else aside, I mean, I think it's, the Lyme Community Development Committee is a valuable committee. I think it was a good, there were plenty of disagreements, there were some agreements, but it was a good conversation to have. And it helps, I thought it helped us, think things through, and it's good to get that sort of input. But this whole thing about how they ever got into the position where they feel that they're authorized to basically take over or have equal footing in the process, I just think that's completely wrong.
Okay, well, they've been told, and these are not people who just like, deputize themselves. They've been told that that's their role.
No, well, actually, if you read their charge, I don't think it says that.
For increasing the tax base?
Yeah, for increasing the tax base, there's nothing about visioning in the charge that I
But the
recall.
initial description was explicit about zoning changes, correct?
That doesn't give them the authority to take over.
Well, they may interpret it that way.
Well, I think they should uninterpret it.
Well, I agree with you, but I'm trying
Well,
to see it from their point of view.
Well,
And
I think
they
they
may
made
not-
their
They
point
may
of
not
view clear.
know the law.
Well, I think we should point it out to
Yeah,
them.
I mean, they may not know.
All right, so on that note, after having read all of the letters, I wrote
An omnibus?
what I thought might be.
Synopsis.
Oh,
I was
good.
even gonna offer to synthesize these, but since you've already done it.
Well, let's see if I've done
Well,
it.
Yeah.
John, you are a very strong writer, so I.
Yeah, but
appreciate
I may be a strong writer, but I may be writing the wrong stuff, so I mean, that's
Okay.
what you have to,
Okay.
so I can either read it, well, shall I read it?
I'll need to read it.
All right.
I mean,
You'll need
I
to-
can't do
okay.
it tonight.
You can't do it
Well,
tonight, because I'd like to
I
get this.
just don't process these things that quickly.
So I just make some general comments?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought all the letters were great, and I thought they were all pretty consistent in what the message was. Some of the things that I would suggest emphasizing more, like starting with, is I think everyone started with, we're glad you came to the meeting and started this discussion, and that was great. But I think emphasizing really what our key message is at the beginning is
Okay.
pretty critical, rather than putting it at the end.
Okay.
Although we could add it at the end as well in a conclusionary kind of statement. But I thought the message that, the law is that, the master planning is organized and brought upon by the planning board, kind of got lost a little.
Well, that's, it didn't get lost in this rewrite.
Awesome.
I don't think it's lost in Eric's. Eric's was pretty.
Yeah,
good.
I actually had mine organized the other way first, and then I just cut and pasted the two, I said, no.
Yeah,
go with
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Well, my first sentence, I just said under RSA 674,
Yeah.
I just, and I
Yep.
said what it was.
I thought yours was,
The high
actually really, no, seriously, I mean, I was really impressed with just how
Succinct.
succinct it
It
was.
was amazing.
No, but you said what needed to be said.
Yeah.
And I wrote something at the length of War and Peace to say what you said in about a paragraph. So I really am impressed.
That's how you get published as a writer, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Keep writing.
Right, just keep writing. So, you don't wanna read this here?
I can, but the way my brain works, I won't digest it for,
Okay,
Well, maybe you should read it,
I
and
think-
get copies of it.
yeah.
I can read it, it's fine.
Well, what, you wanna make
Yeah,
copies?
if you can, yeah, go make copies
It's
right
ju-
now.
it's-
Well, can we take 10 minutes to read it and mark it up and then just pass it back to John?
Yeah, why don't we do that? And,
As a
but you will
first-
have a pass that it might take you
I'm
months.
with Eric, but, okay, we'll see how 10 minutes
It's,
feels.
Yeah.
it's,
No, it feels
it's,
fine.
it's late in the day.
Copies for the public?
Yes. John, is that copies for the public?
Are people comfortable with that, or should, they may, let them look at it first and.
Who knows what it says?
That's fine with me, I have no problem with it, there's nothing I wrote in there that I wouldn't say publicly anyway, so. But I will leave it up to the board.
Well, I think we gotta ask about releasing this document.
My answer is yes, I think you should have a copy.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's the right answer.
It's a public meeting.
Legally.
It's a public
Yeah.
meeting, so poor David, I'll just tell him to make extra copies for him.
Yeah, as long as we know it's a draft.
I mean, you were about
Yeah.
to read it out loud, right?
I was
So-
gonna do it out loud.
Put it on tape.
You read it out. Process.
Actually, that might help you, right? That you
Reading?
can see-
No.
You see the video tomorrow
Oh, the video.
of
right now.
the dramatic reading?
I just need to read things a few times before I'm a
I-
quantitative person, not
I-
a,
I
it's just
totally
words.
It's
I
okay.
definitely like
You've got great skills.
the language, I liked yours actually, it was great.
I like big, I thought big.
I thought they were all actually really good, but
No.
Well, I'd like to report that I went down the hall and I came back and I noticed that nothing major had changed in the entire vestibule. Things remain much like they were when we all entered, and
Oh.
I think that should be included in the record.
It's talking about words too.
Yes, absolutely.
Looks nice.
All right, so, in the meantime, anybody have any other?
Well, can we just like press pause? So,
Yeah.
okay, so we talked about doing a housing chapter.
Yeah,
We talked about regulatory update for like basically site plan and subdivision.
all right.
And then we talked about, doing visioning. Are we gonna like do a big vision?
I-
Or are we just gonna try to get?
I
the,
think that's an
the
open
house-
I
the
think,
Housing and economic development.
I think
vision.
that's something we have to
Okay,
work out.
okay.
It's the board's, whole board's decision
With regards to visioning.
with regards to it. So, in the meantime, does the public have any comments?
I think you're doing a great job.
Those are the type of comments that are both rare and much appreciated.
No, I do have a comment. Maybe
Okay.
you've already heard, John, but it was very good news on River Road.
I did hear that, and that would be just terrific.
The road is like risen back up, it's rising.
Yes,
it's no
yes, the
longer
road
Road's good.
has
It's
re-amalgamated,
very frosty.
Gone in there and heaved it back up.
just a miracle.
River's changing direction, putting soil
It's
back.
the opposite of the parting of the Red Sea. It's the reformation of the River Road embankment. It is great now.
Moving it over 50 feet
All right,
and getting it done by
so
August
do your reading.
without much money.
So moving it uphill away from,
It's a little unclear as to how far uphill,
I think, away from 50 feet away from,
but, yeah,
fine by me.
it's a great solution.
So as we, well, I can wait until we're all done.
Okay. You plagiarize some of you, plagiarize some of everybody's.
That's what a omnibus bill is all about. I feel like the Jeopardy song should be on. Are we done?
It's probably watch some tape and watch.
Well, they're gonna be looking at David's head anyway. Oh, no, I can see the thing. I can see the- People need more time? Vicky, you want more time? I think that's a yes.
I'm making progress.
Okay, so,
But, okay, are we just gonna hand in, or are we gonna
I
discuss?
don't, you are all decision makers.
Okay. Well, is our goal then to get finalize it and get it so that we can send it, I mean, they deserve a response.
I think we should
so, yeah.
get them,
I would like to.
I'd like to
do that.
respond as soon as we could.
Okay.
So maybe I can start because
Not
only-
maybe,
I just,
not
well,
maybe,
I just,
you
I'm
start.
still so in disagreement of some of these issues. First of all, the planning board strongly disagrees that the town can develop its way out of its tax problem. So that is stating that we agree there's a tax problem.
Okay, so,
And so I actually don't technically agree with that.
but that's important, so,
So,
I agree with that as well. and I-
you mean, you agree with Amber?
It's, yeah, I don't agree that there is a tax problem.
Okay,
so,
We would need to have some analysis comparing other towns and blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
most towns have a tax. Lebanon's
I
having
know,
a tax
but
problem.
does that, if every town appears a tax problem, are they really tax problems?
yeah.
Yeah,
Where are you
well-
gonna move to
Well,
get rid of the
so
tax
here
problem?
it is, so.
okay, okay.
If I can just, so,
It's like the death
one of
problem.
these fellows from the committee,
What's that?
one of the fellows
Oh,
from
yeah.
this committee called, the RPC and wanted to talk to our, executive director about something that they wanted to propose. And, in those conversations, they said that 1/3 of the town of Lyme couldn't afford their taxes. They said that there were, many people, constructing, basically ADUs, and now we were getting infiltrated by families who, were bringing children in and putting them in our school systems.
This is the community development
This is
committee?
one person who
Oh.
called.
So on the one hand saying that people couldn't afford to live here, but on the other hand saying that accommodating the people who couldn't afford to live here was causing an influx of people who could afford to live here.
Yeah, and
Well,
also
that's a
stating
little
that
bit of
there's a
circular
whole
logic.
bunch of development occurring in our community
But
because
isn't
people
it,
are creating ADUs.
but that's
So-
what they want is.
So, yeah, I'm so the first thing I would just like to say is maybe we just don't go there in this letter, because I don't think we actually
Yeah,
need to.
I don't think it needs to be in there either.
Okay,
Because, well, at least I wouldn't take that
I mean, this
position.
is, I mean, this is.
Well,
I mean,
I think one thing we could say is there are varying opinions about whether there is or how much of a tax problem
Yeah.
there is on on the board, so that we represent
Well-
that there's a,
I would like to just know, like, I mean, I think it would be really great for Sue to bring that information to us, like, how many delinquencies do we actually have? Like, how many people are not paying their taxes really in this town? Right, I mean, those are serious issues, and if 1/3 of our population is really delinquent on their taxes, then that's really like,
is that
that's
your,
huge, we
is that
should be
your
dealing with
impression?
that, but,
No.
There's a bunch of delinquent taxes, but I don't know how people do it, they'd rather pay 18% than pay their taxes. Because they let them go for the 3 years and then write a check.
So but I guess the question isn't necessarily whether that's the gauge of whether there's a tax problem. I mean, just in talking to people, and I know you can.
I mean,
Isn't what we
Well, there's
disagree
a-
about is rezoning the town to accept more commercial development? We're not, that's,
That's not central to the discussion, but
Right.
it's, it's certainly
Well,
something that we should, we should be sensitive to.
There is a tax problem.
Yeah.
There's always a tax problem, whether you're paying $40,000 a year, which I know a lot of people pay $40,000 a year in property tax, even though they might be able to afford it, it's a problem for them. And so I don't think we can even
Well,
imply that there isn't a
Well,
tax problem.
that what I hear is more about people who are, I hear about people who, or at least anecdotally,
Moving out of town.
moving in town, that they can't afford to stay here.
this is a problem as well.
But it is a problem in every
in
town.
every
Right, because the
town,
taxes are growing up
every-
faster than people's wages, incomes are growing, up in most cases, and
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Well-
Anybody that's on a fixed income,
Fixed income,
Is
I
that-
would say the,
well, but
who isn't on a fixed income?
But
Well,
wages aren't
Who
going
goes
up,
like, "Bleh," and all of a sudden I got more? No, everybody's on really fixed.
well, except if we're still working, you get some, in theory, you
But
get
I
some.
agree with Amber, that we can have this discussion but it doesn't even need to be in the letter. We don't even need to be debating whether there's a tax problem in this discussion.
Well, it's hard not to include it, because the entire basis of the discussion was on the very urgent need to address this issue, so I don't think we can
That's-
avoid it.
But I think,
but we
I
could
think
start
it's, I
with,
think it's a place where we need more input from the town.
yeah.
Well, I kinda like the way that I ended up, the final thing that I said, our master plan and zoning ordinance embody principles of development that are meant to reinforce small towns in New England. They both work to direct development, to strengthen our villages and to minimize sprawl. I mean, I think what we need to do is bring up those land use
Yeah,
principles,
but
that's what
minimum,
we're
exactly.
into. And then we can say, we can increase our tax base by focusing development to areas already zoned to receive that development. Immediately, the emphasis should be on achieving our economic potential as we plan for the future and future areas for growth or something, you know, because I just thought that that was.
Well, let's
we can just-
include
We
it.
can just hold that, I mean, that's kind of a proxy for what you said here, in a way. Because you're, I mean, it's not,
Well, yours is, you know, it's sort of like the principle, this is addressing what actually went on in the meeting, I
Right.
thought.
okay.
So if we wanted to keep this here, we just need to make sure we change tax base to tax revenue, I think, too.
Yeah, this is the same issue we
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, John, in the first paragraph, or second paragraph, where property tax increases are an ongoing problem,
I would take that out.
I would
right?
take that.
Okay.
Because that first paragraph, actually, you take that out and take out the.
Well, yeah,
zoning
because there is not
ordinance
agreement, obviously, on that.
thing.
And
Well, but I think.
what was the other thing to take out?
The last sentence, because I think what we can do is, you know, in the very last paragraph, we can say, you know, you guys can play an important role as outlined in paragraph 1, and be an effective partner as we consider, you know, with us as we consider Lyme's future. So we can, that's
Okay.
what we want them to do, and those are all things that would be great for them to do, so,
You mean,
the first paragraph. Just
Okay.
take out the property taxes and take out the
The-
zoning ordinance in the last sentence, and
Okay.
then we can
add that,
refer them
add that
back
to the end?
to the end,
Okay.
yeah, to say, these are all things you can do.
So the rest of the things in there, we are agreed on?
Yes, I'm good with those.
Anybody have any problem with what's in that first paragraph?
The only thing that I remember Nils saying is that he was leaning toward residential
Yes,
development,
he was,
not commercial.
yes,
But
he said both.
But these,
Which was really confusing, but,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you seem to sell the commercial development story, and then it seemed like a bait and switch to me.
yeah.
Well,
I'm looking at my notes here, and it's like,
Yeah, it was all
No,
about commercial
The
development.
whole thing was,
Residential
the
development
whole
is
thing
the
was
other half
commercial
forward.
development, at a certain point, he
Yeah.
said, but we're not gonna get it, because there's no return on investment, I watched the tape.
Yeah.
And then he said, really the only thing that's gonna give us, and I think he used the phrase, our tax base, whatever the phrase, would be, more intense residential development, and he suggested, it should be by, the Hanover border, and I believe he said 12 to 30 condo units, at Pondview. And-
30 units.
Yeah. Well, he quietly said a dozen to 30, but I think the math works out that the 30 is really what you would need to get this sort of revenue.
But it's not a net figure.
It's not remotely in that figure, and that's.
I think you're too nice to them. I think that they have an axe to grind, they have anecdotal stories that they tell one another, they don't have data. I think it's nice to be nice, but don't be too nice, because they don't deserve it. Or
Well, that-
maybe you should send them out and ask them to come up with some hard numbers, hard data.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say, David. I was thinking about this, and, you know, we approach this theoretically all the time. It's always theory, and we don't get anywhere. Why don't we say to the Community Development Committee, bring us a developer. Bring up a developer here, have him tell us what he wants to do, you know? I mean, that would be seems to me, the logical beginning.
I don't.
That's random though.
Yeah, I think that's
don't know why
random.
we just aren't focusing on what we have to offer already, I mean,
Well, but I mean,
That's okay to
then we can
focus
say,
on.
do it where we have it to offer. But there's nobody out there that's come to Lyme in how many years?
Well,
Because you're unfriendly to business.
No, but I think,
Yeah, that's the whole point.
I think that, you know, the first thing was to expand, wanting to expand the commercial district, and when you look closely at the commercial district, I think at least half of it is not utilized
It's not being used.
and it's there for the taking.
Right.
So.
It's
you know,
more than it was not enough.
It's more than that, because
We don't have enough and it's not attractive, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
what
but I
we
mean.
have, because it's not enough.
However, yes, well put, but, I mean, Mike Smith addressed it, he said that, you know, he was in Hanover because they had the infrastructure, and that the size and area of our commercial district is really defined by the limitations of what we have to offer. And Niels and Mike both agreed, we're not getting that stuff. I mean, when Niels, if I recall correctly, when Niels said that it was really residential that would offer the revenue he was looking for, I think he said it after saying, we're not gonna get that infrastructure, the town's too small to ever get a sewer system and all of that.
Well, the question is whether, if we built residential, would that actually be a tax increase to the town? Now, David knows more about this than I do.
No, I mean, everybody in their letter, and everybody, I think, you know, there was just a lot of discussion about it at the meeting. I think it's pretty clear that with that type of development, there are going to be major impacts on the town. And what I find kind of hard to understand is this limited linear thinking that, oh, if we can just get this number, reach this number of 400, there are gonna be no other side effects from this. But to reach that number, you're gonna have to be developing on a scale that's gonna have huge implications. And if you're, you know, if you wanted to do that year in and year out because you're having a $400,000 shortfall, the implications are ridiculous.
Right.
Well, look at Orford, doesn't have zoning, and look at all the big developments they've got going.
Yeah.
Stacy can't sell the land.
I mean, seriously.
No, it's true.
I mean,
That's
that's,
probably
because
because
it's-
they're not that far north.
Right,
Yeah.
but the
Here's
school
the-
system is a big difference. Well, David knows more about this than I do, but I guess it was Christine Monroe that's gonna rent her house. And she went to Jeff Valens to ask him about, because she lives right there, ask him about how much he thought she should rent it for. And I guess the discussion came up that he has approximately 20 people that have given him their names to say, as soon as something comes available in Lyme, I wanna come here, I wanna get here with my kids.
But why
He's
not?
got, so Jeff has a list of people.
Guys,
What?
that's great.
And we know it's great, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, but I'm just saying,
Like,
all I'm
it's so
saying,
great
but I'm
really,
just saying though,
that our
increased housing.
community is desired.
Right,
It is.
it's great.
It
doesn't
We're
mean
talking
you
about
have
the
to
I
do
know, I know, but I'm just
But from a
saying.
property tax,
But that's,
yeah,
I
I'm just
know.
saying, I'm just throwing it out
Yeah.
there, that if we increase
Look,
any kind of affordable housing,
No, I think you're looking at it backwards. It's, everything has to be considered, you know, the impacts have to be considered, including the school. But it's not a matter of, it's not like all or nothing, I guess.
I think in this paragraph, if you wanna talk about development, I think it's fine to talk about a broad brush about how we need to do a full-scale impact study to address all the issues. And we can't make any, I don't think we should put any conclusions in here about whether or not we can develop our way out of the $400,000 hole.
I mean, I think it's obvious, but I'm happy to.
Is that our role to discuss that?
Well, David did his back of the envelope assessment, and, you know, somebody talked about that in
Yeah, it was-
their letter, and,
Yeah.
I mean, that's specifically addressing, you know, this premise, where, you know, that's totally unreasonable, we're not gonna get that many, 20 times what the average, you know,
Right,
size
but
and
I
cost is.
I guess my point is, I think all of that discussion is a much larger discussion than we can put in this letter.
Okay, so you don't wanna say anything about that? You just want the thing about the revision process? Well, the first paragraph is okay?
The first paragraph, we agree, those are things we agree about.
What
Second
about the-
paragraph is
what about the
stuff we
second
don't
paragraph?
agree about.
well, we take out the property tax.
Yeah, those are out, but.
One question is, you just have, fourth line down, the board's rightful role. Do you want to?
Legal role.
I was gonna say, you wanna change that to a legal, and just reiterate that it is,
And take the word
law.
urge and just say, we command you
Where, what's,
to
what
cease
paragraph?
this
No, I mean,
activity.
no, all right, so you wanna take out what?
about the fourth line
Oh,
down,
the-
the board's rightful role, and change that to legal, because it is, the legislature has
Yeah, that's a good idea.
said that it is
Where
the
is it?
planning board's role.
Oh, yes, all right, legal role. And, yeah, I mean, the urge is, it's just,
Yeah.
I mean,
Strongly urge.
you want me to put strongly urge?
I would just say,
Recommend.
you know,
Recommend is,
And I just say LDC should put an end to its ambitions. Or must.
Okay.
Or,
Well,
we encourage you to be, a part of our process.
I think, yeah, we can
In a
just say,
proper
the LCDC, should put an end to its ambitions.
It's pretty clear this is a cease and desist
Yeah,
message, isn't it?
I think so. Well, frankly,
We all agree on
I
that,
think
don't
that was my biggest takeaway from that meeting was, wait a minute, how did the tail get to wag the dog? Just, what's going on here? All right, so with those changes, this second paragraph is okay, so we're good, first, second,
Well, I don't know,
No.
I feel like the word aggressively should be removed. I think.
I will take that
I'd say,
out. I don't have
okay,
a-
I mean, I understand how you feel, and I believe you've
Yeah.
really been really articulate, but I think the
Okay,
message gets
I have no,
across
I have no
by
problem, I have no
changing that,
problem.
by taking
I have
out.
no problem
Okay,
with
so
that.
it just would say the LCDC has moved to preempt the board's legal role.
Preempt.
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
period. And,
Take that incomplete.
yeah, yep, and I think that gets to the point,
Okay,
without
Yeah, there's no point in
flaming the
taking
fire.
it. Right.
no
Yeah, I
problem,
mean,
that's
this-
why we're
this-
going over.
This can be, I mean, this bit should just be factual,
It is.
right? And we don't wanna add any emotion or opinion or anything like that to it, and just lay out the law.
So, are you
Right.
happy with it now, or?
Do we wanna say doing so without posting agendas or minutes until they were requested made matters even worse? That's a.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
a
those
little
two
strong.
sentences, the doing so and the board only learned of LCDC's existence through word of mouth. I don't think we need those in
Don't
there.
need those.
Okay, so,
I like those.
Even though John.
yeah,
understand-
I disagree, but I will go with the, I think it's, actually, I'm certainly willing to go along with, the consensus, but, my opinion is that it's not just that this was done, the manner in which it was done is really,
I understand.
really a problem for me.
Yeah.
I understand.
Uh,
It's
And
inflammatory.
I think it should be emphasized that how it was done was a problem, but it's on film, so I got to have my say. I have a
I agree
major,
with taking out the part of that, we only learned of it through word of mouth.
Yeah.
It was on a listserv, it was advertised on the website.
but everybody's not
when they
on
were
listserv,
looking.
and it was,
It was
there's
also
stuff,
on the town website.
It was not on the town
In a request
website.
for,
but their minutes
people.
weren't on there.
no, but that part I would leave in,
Okay,
because that's a violation of RSA 91A, the open meeting
Well,
law.
Well, then the sentence about the minutes, let's phrase that in a way that
I'll
says-
take it out, I'll take it
No, you can leave it in,
out.
but-
I had my say,
Well,
I mean, I think it's fine to leave it in there as long as it's the made matters worse.
I don't have any
which-
problem, let's take it out. And the board only learned it through word of mouth. Okay, so we're down to one sentence now, right? By raising funds, blah, blah,
well,
blah.
no, having a one-page letter has its benefits.
Right, to be absolutely clear, do you still want that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
Okay. And then it goes that paragraph finishes, the LCDC should put an end to its ambitions in this area, do you still want that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and what about the following paragraph? Do you want that in there or not? Or should that be somewhere else? Or not in?
Well, it's kind of like, it could be a new paragraph, in its own thing, saying, and I was thinking about, you can be sure that, planning board will be posting agendas and minutes as it works to, do final changes to the master plan with input from, that's,
So I like having this paragraph in here, and I think the implication should be that, we should solicit input in an unbiased manner and solicit unbiased analyses. And the idea being we're implying that we understand that they're here with an agenda and that they're not bringing in unbiased.
Well, they're advocates,
Exactly.
and that's the role they should play, and it's a rightful role, but as advocates, they shouldn't be,
Exactly.
you know.
But ultimately, they can't make zoning
They
changes,
can't.
so
No.
it has to go through us anyway.
It has to go through the town, and they can do a petition to them. All right, so what about that?
I think that should just be a separate standalone paragraph about how we're going to proceed,
Can you just put a star before understanding and start doing?
Yeah, I
That's
think
fine.
that was intended,
Yeah.
right? Anyways.
Okay. Okay, so that's a standalone paragraph, and people are,
Yeah,
fine.
lowercase the c, please, for in committees.
Oh, okay.
You're picking up on my bad habits.
Yeah, I can't, no, I got plenty of my own. All right. So what else? Oh, so did we clear up this the third star, or what is now the fourth star?
I would just say we're gonna finish the housing chapter, master plan housing chapter, don't just say information section or whatever. just
All right,
say-
you mean this one? Is that what you're talking about?
Well,
The third.
the paragraph that begins with
Oh, okay, so
understanding.
what
We'll
would
just
you say?
finish the housing chapter, the master plan's housing chapter. We don't need to say just the informational section, because we're gonna have
Okay.
a bunch of different stuff in there.
The board will finish the housing chapter.
Yep,
Okay.
because I mean, we've been working on it for 2 years, so we need to.
Yeah. All right.
And then take out, build out analysis.
No, I
Leave
think
that.
they're start doing that, yeah.
Okay, so what about the next, we need to come to a consensus about that. So there is an agreement on the planning board about how to view the tax issue. So, let me ask, do you just not wanna discuss the issue of whether the town can develop its way out of the tax issue?
Or it's perceived, I mean, that's the thing, is I just haven't seen real data that tells me there's a tax problem. That's
Well-
different than any community in this state. I mean, I
Oh,
have
right,
like
no,
all
I
of the
agree.
tax data here, and
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Amber.
we are right in the middle of
We're-
everyone in the state.
Right, but still, we're talking about specifically Lyme, and there are people in Lyme that are having problems, and so I don't think we should
Yeah.
we shouldn't imply that we
That
don't
they're-
think there's a.
I'm not
Lyme
saying
problem.
that I don't think there is a problem for some people, but I don't think it's necessarily a town-wide problem. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
people that would, I mean, I think you could say everyone wants to see lower taxes.
Right, right.
But a tax problem that has to be addressed in 1 year, and we have to get $400,000
Well, I think,
in
yeah,
tax revenue
Right.
is not
Yeah, no,
really,
you're right.
Well,
I don't agree with that. So that's all.
well, how about saying something like the planning board strongly disagrees that, you know, an annual target of a net 400, however you wanna say
I
it.
think we should say that this should not be driving zoning changes.
Right, I think that's
We
well put.
should say
Yeah,
that,
is
that a revenue goal should not drive changes to the master plan and changes to the zoning ordinance. And I'm sure we all agree about that.
Mhm.
And then you say,
Great.
furthermore, this would ignore all of the impacts of excessive development.
I think the last two paragraphs of Vicky's letter, I think, kind of are,
Let's
it's
go
like
with
saying it,
Vicky's letter. Here's Vicky.
you can almost tack that on to the charge to broaden the tax base cannot be solved simply by rezoning more land.
Okay, so let's add, is everybody?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so let's get rid of this.
And the last paragraph, I thought was really nice too, where it was like, you know, our master plan and zoning ordinance
Right.
embodies principles of development that reinforce small towns and
All right, so,
I thought that was a good,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
good mashup.
last two of Vicky. And, then the sign off, and, is everybody okay with where we are then?
And then it is valuable for Lyme to have a committee like the
And it
LCD.
is.
I think that's a nice way.
Well, and I think it's,
And
Lyme-
kind of
well, yeah,
positives.
no, I mean, these people are putting in their time and effort, and, I think everybody in town should be encouraged to do that, so my hat's off to them. I just, have disagreements with what they're saying, but.
Should we flesh out the paragraph where we suggest what an appropriate role for them is?
I think they can figure out their appropriate role. I mean, all that's being said here is that we consider them an advocate group, and they can do whatever they want as an advocate. I don't think we're really in a position to tell them what they should do or shouldn't do, except where it really crosses the line
Yeah.
in terms of our role.
They're not talking about cutting spending, they're talking about increasing the tax base.
That's, I think that's,
pretty specific.
it's a worthy thing to have a discussion about. They just should not be visioning and trying to run the master plan, that's all.
I think at the community development committee, though, there are some really positive steps they could take that would be good for the town. And the ones that were up here in the first paragraph are great things to encourage them to do.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about fleshing out the role for them.
Except for the website that promotes the town, I think.
You don't like that?
Well, it wouldn't want,
Keep it, keep it
well,
quiet. you know?
they could do a page or two about, commercial properties available,
This is true.
on the town website, not to have a separate website. But, if that would help Earl get, tenants or somebody to buy that property or, whatever, that would be great.
But they could do things like that through the Hanover Chamber of Commerce or things like that.
Well, but I mean, really, they know they can do these things.
Yeah.
They don't need our
Right.
input on it, it's just, I think it's,
My only issue with putting it on the town's website is you start getting, or I get a lot of requests to put information up from different groups. And if you start putting up for one, then the others are gonna come in and say, oh, we want our stuff up too. And it just becomes a nightmare to try to keep all the information current.
well, this was an idea that they had
Yeah.
anyway, so, you probably.
I don't
have
think
to
they
do it.
should have a separate website, and if it needs to be okay by the selectmen about what goes on, that's fine, but, that could be their project.
Mhm.
I don't think we should be really getting involved in what they should or shouldn't be doing, other than stating that they shouldn't be getting involved in what it's the planning board's responsibility to do. They're all capable, mature people who can decide for themselves.
You know, the very first paragraph about we're glad we could all finally sit together, I mean, I would like it to say, while it was good to find areas of agreement, I think it's okay to say it was also good to clearly identify some areas of disagreement.
Okay.
And, you know, that was a good thing.
Well, actually, it's kind of a weird phraseology if you ask me.
Well, I mean,
There are also areas of disagreement.
It's just, yeah, I mean, this is just an introductory thing, and,
but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing.
no, it's not a bad thing.
So that's why I wanna say
This
it was a
isn't,
good thing.
this isn't written with any judgment.
Yeah.
What was good about finally getting together is they and we all had a chance to actually talk with each other
Yeah.
and see where we agreed and where we didn't.
What if we said, while it was good to find areas of agreement, and there were also areas of disagreement?
It doesn't matter, I mean, this
That
is
would
very
change it a little
benign,
bit.
I don't care.
Okay.
What do you wanna say, while it was good to find areas of agreement?
And there were also, I mean, that's
It
sort
was
of
also
changes
good,
it.
and, you know, to clearly identify areas of
Yeah.
disagreement, I mean, you know, that's okay, because.
Okay,
that's
so-
what
We say,
work on.
we think the conversation benefits both from areas of agreement and disagreement.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I told you I'm a quantitative person.
Good to find areas of agreement. It was also good to
no, no, I mean, we are now really lost in the weeds, you know?
Productive discussion with both areas of agreement and disagreement.
Right, that's good,
All right,
so we don't have to gauge it either or good.
it was a productive
10% agreement.
No, we all agree,
Discussion
we
with
moved here because
areas of
it's a
dis-
pastoral environment that we all love, you know? so-
Hold on, folks, can we just get this done? It was a productive discussion.
With areas of both agreement and disagreement.
Of areas of what?
You need to bring a laptop next to you, John. This is
With areas of what?
agreement and
Agreement
disagreement.
and disagreement.
Agreement and disagreement. I disagree with that.
Of both, did you?
Oh, I didn't include the
The
both.
vote doesn't matter.
Oh my God, this is like worse than dealing with editors. It was a productive discussion with both areas, no, areas.
Okay,
of
forget it.
Agreement and disagreement.
Forget the both.
Who cares?
Okay.
Good God.
Forget the vote, fine.
It was a productive
It's gonna all
discussion
sound bad, like
with areas of
tomorrow morning.
agreement and disagreement. I mean, what is it? It's really
Alright,
ridiculous. Okay.
Consensus document.
All right, so what I'm gonna do is write this up, send it to David. David, if you could just send it to everybody so that if anybody has it, we cannot communicate with each other.
Correct.
But if you have an objection, you can communicate it to David.
I can
And-
communicate it back.
Could you communicate, are you allowed to communicate it back to me?
Yes.
Okay,
You can't have discussions
We
amongst
can't have
yourself, but you
discussions.
send
But
everything
we
to
can
me
go
and I
through
can
you.
send it back
all right.
out, you just can't.
So that was easy. Not.
It's a,
I think we need writing assignments every week.
Yeah, but, you know, I was, seriously, I was so impressed with everybody's.
I did it.
even though I was the last person to submit, I promise I did not look at any of yours before.
Well,
I'm
yours
seriously,
was-
I promise I did not.
Yours was like,
Yours
yours was the
That's
Sergeant Friday, you know, from, what was that, Dragnet, you know, just the facts, man.
I had the notes, I jotted the notes down like the day after the meeting, and then, you know, got David's email yesterday, I'm like, oh.
You're such best organized.
You're definitely the best organized. You get the best organized award.
I'm very
All right,
structured.
so next week's next meeting's writing assignment will be, what you did for your summer vacation. All right.
Now you have to write about the trees that are being trimmed on the Orfordville Road that you're all supposed to drive out on.
Right. Has
Oh,
it-
man, you might
Are
need
they-
to email reminder.
Which reminds me, I'm not gonna be here next time, so,
Okay.
25th.
Is that what it is?
2 weeks, yes.
Okay. Does the public have anything they want to say?
I'm sorry to ask, but could you tell me how you ended up with the planning board disagrees that the town can develop this way out.
How I ended up with that?
Well, the letter,
Oh,
sorry.
We took it out.
You
took
took
it
it
out.
out, good.
Yeah.
And you ended with Vicky's two very
Vicky's
good
two paragraphs.
Great, well done.
Any other, you got nothing? You got nothing?
No.
What about this Sterling group?
Let's see. Are we gonna be able to do the discussion at Little Town Meeting about the zoning amendments?
Tim said he'd like to do it.
Okay,
Actually, I don't think it'll be here.
I'm not gonna be either, so.
You know, has there been one town meeting where everybody from the board disappears except for me?
I've been at every little town meeting, I never go away, but that's the only time I
Yeah,
can.
yeah, right.
I've gotta be working that night in Hanover, so I can't
Yeah.
make it, I'm sorry.
Well, I have an important nap I have to take.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll do it,
Okay, well, I just wanted to be sure we had somebody to speak to them.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
somebody,
Preferably intelligent one.
yeah, somebody.
This meeting's the 22nd, not the
Yeah,
25th.
that's what I said.
22nd,
Okay.
okay.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, Jay, the CIP, are we still gonna do anything with that?
Well, Jay's not.
Well, they put together about 6 different committees to work on different parts. So far, I haven't seen anything.
Okay, because I haven't talked to you about it for a while, so I just wondered where it stands. Yeah, because you were gonna, yeah, you had.
I
some
have
things
several
before-
sections.
Before you and I got together. but-
Yeah.
Yeah.
See what they come up with.
Okay.
They wanna build a new firehouse. They do something with the transfer station. Or 10-year temporary permit.
Expired 20 years ago.
Okay, well, I just.
DES keeps relicensing us, and they don't say anything really, so.
It's much better than it was when it was out in front of the school. With the temporary crusher truck that came in, that was, it's much better now. I love that.
Well, we're running out of room now for material storage for the highway department. It doesn't really meet any of the standards that are required.
Transfer station.
And they actually, we lose money because with the bins just out in the open like that, nobody wants the wet paper, most of that's winding up in landfill.
Hmm.
So we pay $70-something a ton to get rid of it.
What if we put just one of those plastic buildings over when they aren't that expensive, just put it over the dumpsters there? And then you could move it later, you know, then if you didn't need it there at some point.
Yeah,
you
but
could
you
move it,
need
use it.
something a little sturdy, you know, you see Bailey's.
Turkey.
Oh, yeah, that's because it's been there forever. So they're pretty rugged, those.
Well, usually just the cover's got a steel frame on that one, actually. Bent.
Well, that was a lot of rain on a lot of snow.
Anyway,
But look at the turkeys went there.
So in terms of the planning boards, really Tim was gonna be the planning board CIP guy, is he just shouldn't bother?
No, I wouldn't bother right now.
okay, yeah, because, yeah, initially, well, before you got sick or whatever, there was a few things Jay had to do, and then we were gonna
Right.
get together and go, but it,
Well, it seems like things have changed.
Is Kevin Sarr? He's pretty cute.
Oh,
I see you're on the post.
Yeah.
And John did resign
And,
after.
and, and and I still might lose.
oh my gosh, so, okay,
yeah, we got somebody to run for selectman, that was sweet.
he's the one who called the RPC.
Getting harder and harder to find people.
It's, yeah, I mean, it's certainly,
Kevin said that.
it's, what?
Yeah, all right, interesting, well,
He's made some anti-school comments.
yeah.
See the kids?
No.
Not now. Well, they're grown up if he does.
What I was gonna say is it's certainly a lot easier not to, you know, have somebody run against you, but it's kind of too bad. I mean, I'm happy, you know, not to have to deal with it, but it's too bad, and.
Who would wanna run against you, that's the thing.
Oh,
So
yeah,
you
yeah,
intimidate
thank you,
everybody.
yeah. No, but it'd be just good if a lot of people a lot more people were involved. But I'm happy not to have to go through that. I did run against somebody once, and it was a brutal campaign. It was barely survivable, yes. Anyway, you know, I have to say again, that when I look around at all of you and our public, it makes me proud to be a Vermont, no, New Hampshire. Which state is this? Yeah, it's good to be here, that's what I meant to say, yes. And thank you all for coming, and let us continue, the future is ahead.
So what was that?
Because he's not.
Pat Paulson said that, didn't he?
Yeah, it's basically
Yeah, it's a stag
Pat
party.
Paulson's,
Stag party, yeah.
his stump speech.
Yeah.
Yeah.